I'm Bennett, 40M, and for as long as I can remember, family reunions have been the one event I dread every single year. You'd think being around family would be comforting, but for me, it always feels like stepping into an arena where I'm the designated punching bag. This year's reunion was no different. At least, that's what I thought when I pulled up to my parents' house. The place was buzzing with cousins, aunts, uncles, the usual chaos. There was music playing in the background, kids running around barefoot, the smell of grilled food drifting through the air. From the outside, it looked picture perfect. Inside, a different story entirely. The moment I walked through the backyard gate, I felt the shift in the air. Conversations paused for a moment, just long enough for everyone to size me up, then resumed with that fake cheeriness I knew too well. My sister, Lila, 38F, was the first to spot me. She gave me that smirk she always does, the one that says, "Oh, you showed up? How brave." "Well, look who decided to come this year," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm as she balanced a plate piled high with food. "Thought you were too busy with your little project to make time for us." I didn't rise to it. I never do at first. I just gave a polite nod and went to greet my parents. Mom hugged me. Dad clapped me on the back, and for a fleeting moment, it felt almost normal. But then I heard my uncle's voice, Victor, 60M, the self-proclaimed patriarch of the family. "Bennett," he called from the picnic table, holding up his drink. "We were just talking about you." That sentence alone was enough to put me on edge. When my family says they were just talking about me, it's never good. I walked over, forcing a smile. "All good things, I hope." Victor chuckled, shaking his head. "We were saying it's been a while since we've seen you doing anything productive. How's that? What do you call it business of yours going? You actually making money this time? Or is it just another hobby?" He didn't say it with curiosity. He said it like a challenge, like he was daring me to defend myself. "It's going well," I replied evenly. "Better than last year." Lila snorted from across the table. "That's a low bar, Benny. You couldn't go anywhere but up." A few people chuckled, including my Aunt Muriel, who lives for moments like this. She loves being in the audience when Lila or Victor get their little digs in at me. "Hey, don't tease your brother," Mom said quickly, but it was the kind of half-hearted defense that doesn't mean much. Victor leaned back in his chair, swirling the ice in his glass. "You know, Bennett, you really should think about doing something stable. A man your age, still chasing dreams? Come on, you should have a real career by now. Something respectable, like sweeping garages," Lila added with a grin, clearly proud of herself. The table erupted into laughter, and I just stood there, hands in my pockets, taking it. I'd learned a long time ago that arguing back only made things worse. Then, just as I was about to walk away and get myself a plate of food, Victor waved his hand. "Hey, before you go, why don't you fetch us a round of drinks? You know where the cooler is." It wasn't really a question. It was more of an order, like I was still a teenager being told to run errands while the adults talked about serious things. Something in me tightened, but I just nodded and turned toward the house. I could feel Lila's eyes on me, her smirk growing wider. As I stepped inside, away from their laughter, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. My jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. I set the empty drink tray down on the counter and took a long breath, trying to steady myself. This wasn't new. This had been the pattern for years. The condescension, the jokes at my expense, the constant reminders that, in their eyes, I would always be the failure younger brother, the one who never quite measured up. But today was different. Today, they didn't know what I had parked just down the street. I grabbed the drinks, plastered on my best fake smile, and carried them back outside. I set them down in front of Victor, who gave me a satisfied nod like I'd just passed some kind of test. "Good man," he said, raising his glass in a mock toast. I smiled back, but inside, something was brewing. I sat back down at one of the picnic tables, quietly sipping from a bottle of water. The air smelled like charcoal and overcooked burgers, and the sound of clinking cutlery mixed with the constant chatter of my relatives. Normally, I would have found a quiet corner to just sit in until it was time to leave, but I stayed near the main table this time. I wanted to hear what they were saying. Sure enough, it didn't take long before the conversation shifted back to me, as if my very existence was the evening's entertainment. "So, Bennett," Aunt Muriel started, leaning forward with that smile that always meant trouble. "Tell us again what your business is. Something online, right?" She said business, like it was a joke. It's not complicated, I replied evenly. I buy and resell specialty equipment. It's a niche market, but I've built up good contacts over the years. Oh, so you're just flipping things, she said, waving a dismissive hand. That's hardly a career, sweetheart. Lila leaned in, resting her chin on her palm. Remember when he tried to start that little tech company? What did it last a year? And then you were back here begging Dad to help you find work? I felt the muscles in my jaw tighten again. That was a long time ago, I said quietly. Victor chuckled. I remember that. We had a family dinner, and you told everyone you were going to change the industry. And then, what was it? 3 months later, you were out of money and working at the hardware store. Oh, those were the days. Everyone laughed, except for Mom, who looked like she wanted to change the subject but didn't dare interrupt. That's the thing about Bennett, Lila said. He's, what's the word, idealistic. He's always coming up with these little plans, but never actually sticks to anything. I mean, you've lived in, what, for different apartments in the past 10 years? 5. Victor corrected her with a grin. Remember the one with the leaking roof? You called me for advice, but I told you to handle it yourself. Tough love, nephew. More like no love. I muttered under my breath, but they didn't hear me. As the afternoon dragged on, the comments kept coming, little jabs disguised as jokes. Don't eat too much, Benny. Ezra, my cousin, said as I finally made myself a plate. You might need to save money for rent next month. Maybe we should get Bennett to mow the lawn before he leaves, Victor suggested at one point. You know, to feel useful. Even the younger cousins, barely teenagers, started joining in, mimicking what the adults were saying. I could feel my face getting hot, not from the sun, but from the quiet humiliation of it all. Mom finally tried to step in. That's enough, everyone. Leave your brother alone. He came here to spend time with family, not to be teased. Oh, we're just having fun, Lila said, rolling her eyes. He's not that sensitive. But I was. I always had been. They just never seemed to notice or care. At one point, Victor leaned across the table toward me and said, You know, Bennett, I could still get you a job at the company. Entry level, of course. You'd have to swallow your pride, but it's better than whatever you're doing now. I smiled politely. I appreciate the offer, but I'm doing fine. Fine, he said with a laugh. You think living paycheck to paycheck is fine? You think scraping by is fine? Come on, son. At your age, you should have a house, a real car, a retirement account. You should be taking care of your parents, not the other way around. That last part stung hard. I didn't answer. I just stood up, my plate barely touched, and walked away toward the driveway. I could feel every pair of eyes on me as I left the table. Standing next to my old beat-up sedan, I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking, but not from anger, from adrenaline. This was the moment I had been waiting for all afternoon. I unlocked the car and opened the trunk. Inside was the envelope I had been planning to give my parents privately later, a gift I had been saving for months. But now, as I looked back at the house and saw Victor and Lila laughing about something on the porch, I made a decision. If they wanted to see the failure of the family, they were about to see him in a completely different light. I closed the trunk and started walking down the street. A few heads turned as I passed the side gate, curious why I was leaving on foot. Where are you going? Mom called from the porch. Just stepping out for a minute, I said, keeping my voice calm. I turned the corner, my heart pounding. Parked a few houses down was my brand new sports car, still gleaming from the wash I'd given it that morning. I'd left it there on purpose, partly because the driveway was already full, partly because I hadn't planned on making a scene. But after the way they'd treated me, I was no longer interested in keeping things quiet. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and just sat there for a moment listening to the low, steady rumble. It was the sound of every late night I'd spent working, every risk I'd taken, every failure I'd turned into a lesson. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, I shifted into gear and turned back toward the house. From the porch, I saw them notice me one by one. First Ezra, who squinted, then Lila, whose smirk faltered for the first time all day. Victor set his drink down, watching me with open curiosity. I pulled into the driveway, the engine purring softly as I came to a stop right in front of the table where they had been sitting. And then I got out. The yard went silent. Even the kids who had been running around froze, their game forgotten. All eyes were on me as I shut the door and took my time walking around to the front of the car. Whose car is that? Ezra asked first, his voice carrying a mix of confusion and disbelief. It's mine, I said simply, letting the words hang in the air. Victor let out a low whistle, standing up from his chair and strolling toward me like he was inspecting a prize animal at the fair. This is yours, he said slowly. You bought this? Yes, I replied. Lila laughed, but it was shaky this time. No way. You? In a car like this? I just smiled and leaned against the hood. Surprised? Shocked, actually, Victor said. You couldn't even keep your last car running without borrowing money from your dad. Where did you get the money for this? His tone was suspicious now, almost accusatory, as though I had no right to own something this nice. I worked for it, I said, keeping my voice calm. Every late night, every weekend, every risk I took. It finally paid off. There was a long pause before Lila spoke again, her voice sharp. So you've been hiding this from us? Acting like you're barely scraping by when you're out here buying luxury cars. I never said I was scraping by, I reminded her. You all just assumed. Victor crossed his arms, his expression souring. So what, you're successful now? You think that makes you better than us? No, I said evenly. I don't think I'm better than anyone. But I am tired of being treated like the family failure. You were the family failure, Lila snapped, her face flushed now. For years, Bennett. You left us to pick up the pieces every time one of your little plans fell apart. You don't just get to waltz in here, show off a car, and act like that erases everything. I felt the anger rise in me, but instead of yelling, I kept my voice steady. I don't want to erase anything. I just want you all to see that I'm not the person you've been mocking all these years. I've built something on my own. Something real. Victor chuckled, but it was a bitter sound this time. So what's the big deal, huh? You make a little money, you buy a shiny toy, and suddenly you think you deserve respect. It's not just the car, I said, pulling the envelope from my pocket. I came here today to give Mom and Dad this. I held it out, and Mom took it hesitantly. She opened it, her eyes scanning the papers inside. Slowly, she looked up at me, her hand covering her mouth. What is it? Dad asked, taking it from her. He read for a few seconds, then his eyes widened. You bought them a house? The entire yard erupted in shocked murmurs. Yes, I said. A house closer to town, with no stairs, no leaky roof, and a garden big enough for Mom's plants. It's already paid for. All they have to do is move in. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but before she could speak, Victor stepped forward, his face twisted in a scowl. You did this without talking to anyone, he demanded. Without consulting the family? I turned to him, my patience finally snapping. Why would I consult the family about what I do with my own money? You've made it clear for years that you don't respect me or my choices. And now that I've succeeded, you want a say in how I spend it. This is exactly why we never trusted you with responsibility, he said, his voice rising. You make reckless decisions and then parade them around like trophies. You think buying a car and a house makes you a man? It just proves you're still selfish. Lila jumped in, her words sharp as knives. And what about us, huh? You think you're the only one who's struggled? We've been here, working hard, doing the right thing, supporting this family while you ran off chasing fantasies. And now you come back and try to make us look small. I stared at her, stunned for a moment. I'm not trying to make anyone look small. I just wanted to share what I've built. I thought maybe, just maybe, it would make you proud. Proud? Victor barked out a laugh. Of you? Don't kid yourself. Something in me snapped at that moment. All the years of biting my tongue, all the dinners where I sat silently while they mocked me, all the humiliation, it all came rushing back at once. You know what? I said, my voice low but steady. I don't need your pride. I don't need your approval. I came here today to give something good to this family, but you can't see past your own resentment. You've mocked me for years, treated me like dirt, and now that I've proven you wrong, you can't stand it. Victor's face darkened. Watch your tone, Bennett. You're still part of this family, and you'll show some respect. No, I said, taking a step closer. Respect goes both ways. And you lost mine a long time ago. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. No one moved, no one spoke. Even the kids seemed frozen, sensing that something bigger than a family squabble was happening. I turned back to Mom and Dad, softening my tone. The house is still yours if you want it. But if you don't, I'll sell it and use the money for something else. I'm done trying to prove myself to people who will never see me for who I really am. Then I looked at Victor and Lila one last time. And I'm done letting you treat me like I'm less than you." Without waiting for a reply, I got back in the car, the leather seats cool against my back. I started the engine, the low growl filling the silence behind me. Through the windshield, I could see Victor seething, his face red, and Lila whispering something furiously to Aunt Muriel. I didn't leave the driveway completely. I just sat in the car, engine idling, watching them. Victor was pacing now, fists clenched, clearly trying to figure out a way to turn this situation to his advantage. Lila and Aunt Muriel were whispering, casting occasional glances at me as if trying to read my mind through the windshield. It didn't take long for them to regroup. Victor stomped over first, his face twisted in anger. "This isn't over, Bennett. You think you can just waltz in here, throw money around, and suddenly you're untouchable?" I smiled slightly, keeping my voice calm. "I don't want to be untouchable. I just want to be respected." Victor scoffed. "Respect? You've been given every chance to earn respect your whole life, and you've wasted it. Now you think a flashy car and a house will make us admire you? You're naive." Lila stepped up beside him, her eyes sharp. "He's always been naive," she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "We've watched him stumble through life while the rest of us actually worked for our success. And now he comes back acting like he's better than everyone. It's ridiculous." "Ridiculous?" I repeated, voice rising just slightly, but still measured. "You think spending years mocking me while ignoring your own mistakes is what earned you superiority? That's ridiculous." Aunt Muriel added, "You're being dramatic, Bennett. You've got your car, your house, your little empire, and suddenly everyone has to bend over backward because you proved us wrong." I shook my head. "No one has to do anything. I can't keep pretending like your approval matters anymore." Victor's face darkened further. "You think you can lecture me, after all these years of acting like a child? You're lucky we didn't kick you out for good when you kept failing in your 20s. You've always been so stubborn." That word, stubborn, made me smile internally. They always saw it as a flaw, but in reality, it was the very thing that got me here. The late nights building my business, the sacrifices they laughed at, the relentless persistence, it was all stubbornness in their eyes. "You call it stubbornness," I said evenly. "I call it perseverance. And it got me to a point where I don't have to ask anyone for permission anymore." Victor's jaw tightened. "You may have money, but don't think that gives you power over this family. We've survived decades together, and we don't let people walk over us. You think just because you have a car and a house you can rewrite your place in the family?" "Not rewriting anything," I said. "Just setting boundaries. For the first time in my life, I'm not letting anyone treat me like I'm invisible, like I'm a joke." Lila laughed sharply, but it had no warmth. "Boundaries? You think money can create boundaries? That's not how family works, Bennett. Family is about respect, something you clearly haven't earned until now, if at all." I looked around at the assembled relatives, many of whom were staring in shock or whispering to each other. It was the perfect moment. I let them simmer in their own disbelief for a few long seconds, letting the tension build. Then I opened the trunk of the car. Slowly, carefully. Inside were a few smaller envelopes I had prepared, paychecks I'd sent over the years to cover the few times my parents had helped me financially. Every instance they'd bailed me out or lent me money without acknowledgement, I had meticulously recorded. I handed the first envelope to Victor. "Here," I said softly. "Every time you think I was failing, I was actually learning. And every time you think you were helping, I was quietly keeping track. Not out of resentment, but to prove one day I could stand on my own." Victor's hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope. Inside were spreadsheets, receipts, and notes showing every loan repaid, every investment, every calculated risk that had eventually led to my success. "This," he muttered, eyes wide. You tracked all of this?" "Yes," I said. "And now you see that the person you've been mocking all these years is standing here without asking for anything from anyone. That car, the house, it's all me. Every cent, every hour, every choice." For a moment, the backyard was silent except for the soft hum of the sports car's engine. Even Lila, who usually thrived on humiliation, seemed momentarily speechless. Then, in classic fashion, they regrouped. Aunt Muriel shook her head, eyes narrowing. "You think this makes us proud? That we'll just accept this and praise you? You're delusional, Bennett. We don't forgive this kind of behavior so easily." Victor added, voice low but dangerous. "You've shown off your car, flaunted your house, paraded your money, and now you want us to sit here and applaud? Not happening. You've embarrassed the family. You think success excuses every insult you've endured? Think again. Even the younger cousins, who had been staring wide-eyed, began whispering and pointing, caught in the crossfire of the adults' villainous energy. I looked at them all, feeling a strange mixture of vindication and determination. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. And I realized that if I wanted real closure, I couldn't just stand here and defend myself. I had to make them see exactly what their behavior had done over the years, and I had to do it in a way that they couldn't ignore, ridicule, or twist. I closed the trunk slowly, gave the car a reassuring pat, and took a step toward the house. My family thought they were the ones in control, that they could continue the games they'd always played. But from this moment on, the balance had shifted. Victor's eyes narrowed. You think you're walking back inside and everything will be the same? You think a car and a house fix the humiliation? You have no idea what family really is. I smiled faintly because in that moment, I realized he was right. He had no idea. And that was exactly what made what came next so satisfying. I didn't rush back inside. I let the tension hang in the air like a storm cloud, giving everyone a chance to stew in their own assumptions. I knew they were all thinking the same thing. What is he planning? I smiled quietly to myself because, for the first time in years, they had no idea. I stepped toward the porch, keeping my movements calm, deliberate. Victor and Lila immediately mirrored me, their body language aggressive, defensive, protective of their little kingdom. Aunt Muriel hovered slightly behind them, arms crossed, with that permanent expression of judgment on her face. I cleared my throat. Before anyone says another word, I want to make one thing very clear. Everything I've done today, the car, the house, the spreadsheets, the record of every loan repaid, none of it is for approval. None of it is for applause. I'm here to show you that I can stand on my own, and that the way you treated me for decades doesn't define me anymore. Victor snorted. Oh, spare me the speech, Bennett. You think throwing money around makes you a man? You're still the same person we've always known. Selfish, reckless, and naive. I tilted my head slightly. Naive? Maybe. But reckless? Every single choice I made was calculated. Every single risk was weighed. You all saw the failures and assumed I couldn't succeed. And now here we are. I reached into my pocket and pulled out another envelope. This one marked clearly the family agreement. It was a legal document I had prepared months ago, after years of watching them manipulate and belittle me. It outlined that any future family events where I was invited would require mutual respect, that financial assistance or interference in my business was strictly off limits, and, crucially, that they could no longer speak to me in a demeaning or derogatory manner. Victor's eyes narrowed dangerously. What's that supposed to be? Protection, I said evenly. For me. Against years of abuse, against years of manipulation. You've all spent so long trying to make me feel small, trying to make me beg for approval. That stops now. Lila's laugh this time was sharp, bitter. You think a piece of paper is going to change anything? You're ridiculous, Bennett. This is your family. You can't just write rules and expect everyone to follow them. Actually, I said, I can. Because if you don't, there are consequences. Legal consequences. Actions you can't undo. For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the sports car's engine. Even Victor seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Then, I leaned in slightly, letting my voice drop just enough to carry weight. You mocked me when I had nothing. You laughed when I stumbled. You made me feel worthless at every family dinner, every reunion, every holiday. And for years, I said nothing because I wanted to keep the peace. But peace comes at a cost. And now, the cost has been paid. I stepped back, letting the silence stretch. Finally, I gestured toward the house. Mom, Dad, the house is yours if you want it. No strings attached. If not, I'll sell it. The choice is yours. But everyone else, Victor, Lila, Aunt Muriel, anyone who thinks they can diminish me, you will respect my boundaries. You will respect me, or you will face the consequences spelled out here. Victor's face was red, hands trembling slightly. You think you can just threaten the family like this? You've crossed a line, Bennett. You'll regret this. I don't regret standing up for myself, I said calmly. I regret that it took this long for you to understand that I'm not the person you've been mocking. That ends now. Lila, unable to contain herself, stepped forward. You're acting like some kind of hero in your own story. You think showing off your toys and throwing around a house will make us grovel? You're pathetic. I shook my head and smiled faintly. No, Lila, you've misunderstood. This isn't about making anyone grovel. This is about setting the record straight. About making sure that no one, ever again, makes me feel small. You think this is arrogance, but it's clarity. And finally, clarity is on my side. I handed the envelope with the agreement to Mom and Dad. Sign this if you want to have a relationship with me going forward. If not, that's fine. But for the rest of them, they'll have to learn their lesson. Mom and Dad exchanged a glance, a mixture of relief and sadness on their faces, before signing quietly. I nodded, satisfied. Then I turned to the others. Victor, Lila, Aunt Muriel, you'll see that actions speak louder than words. For the first time, you're going to understand that belittling someone doesn't make you superior. I've worked too hard, sacrificed too much, and endured too many years of mockery to let it continue. Victor's jaw tightened, and Lila's lips pressed into a thin line. Aunt Muriel simply glared, her eyes cold. They were villains, plain and simple, unable to see anyone else's accomplishments, unwilling to acknowledge anyone but themselves. And yet, for once, I didn't care what they thought. I looked back at the sports car, then at the house. The tools of my revenge and proof of my independence were right there, undeniable. And for the first time, I felt a sense of peace I'd never felt at a family reunion before. The day ended with the family buzzing with quiet, simmering anger. Victor and Lila kept exchanging whispered comments, glaring at me from across the yard. Aunt Muriel refused to speak to me again for the rest of the afternoon. The younger cousins, who had previously mocked me, now avoided my gaze entirely, uncertain how to interact with someone who had proven himself so definitively. Mom and Dad thanked me quietly, a little teary, for the house and for finally asserting myself. They had been complicit in letting Victor and Lila dominate for years, but they were relieved that I had drawn firm boundaries. I walked back to my car as the sun began to set, the cool leather seat comforting against my back. I started the engine and let it idle for a moment, watching the house one last time. The situation was clear. I had won. They were still villains, proud, entitled, self-centered. But for the first time, they couldn't touch me. They could glare, whisper, complain, and plot, but nothing they could do would erase the life I had built. I drove off slowly, leaving the yard behind, the sound of the engine echoing my triumph. For the first time in decades, I felt untouchable, not because of a car or a house, but because I had finally claimed my dignity on my own terms. And for once, my family had to watch, powerless, as I left them behind. Not angry, not bitter, just victorious. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments. If you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.